Hi friends, welcome to the library. Today I'm here with Gareth. He's going to be helping me with my video. We're sitting fairly far apart because we're not in the same family, so we don't want to spread germs, but we can still see one another. Today I want to read a book that probably a lot of you know. It's Curious George. Do you have this book in your house? You might. Or you might want to have one of the other books by the same author. The author are Margaret and H.A. Rey. When they are married, they are husband and wife. Here are pictures of them. They also wrote a number of books about Curious George and his adventures, like Curious George Goes to the Hospital. They wrote Curious George Rides a Bike. They also wrote the one behind me you can see. It's called Katie No Pocket. It's about a kangaroo that doesn't have a pocket. But today I just want to read this classic, Curious George. When you're done with this video, if you would like, you can watch the next video I'm going to do about the biography of Margaret and H.A. Rey and how Curious George came to America. But today, here's the classic, Curious George. We love the yellow cover. Do you notice anything about the other books that they've done, the covers? What do you notice?
All yellow and the words are all red.
The words are red and the cover is yellow. That's great. So let's open to the title page.
Oh, and if you have your book, bring it with.
Yes, that's a good idea. So there you can see there's some illustrations even inside the cover. There's the title page. And the title is Curious George by H.A. Rey. There's something else we can learn about the title page that you might have noticed already. When you turn to the back of the title page, you can find a date, and that will tell you how old this book is. Does this book look pretty old? It does. It's been around for a while. This one was actually written in 1941. That's when it was first published. That's pretty old. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always curious. The title of this book is Curious George, and they say that George the monkey is curious. Do you know what that means? It really has two meanings, but one of them means that he's interested in finding out about things. He's curious. He thinks, what happens if I do this? What's over that hill? Asking a lot of those questions means you're curious. I have a question for you. Is being curious good? Or is being curious bad?
A little bit in the middle.
I think you're right, Gareth. What do you all think? I think if we read this book, we might find a little bit of both. Let's turn the page. One day, George saw a man. He had on a large yellow straw hat. The man saw George, too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. He put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from the tree to look at the large yellow hat. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his own head. He picked it up and he put it on. That hat is as big as George. The hat covered George's head. He couldn't see. The man picked him up quickly and popped him into a bag. George was caught. The man with the big yellow hat put George in a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. He might be curious about where they're going. He might be curious about the big boat. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I'm going to take you to a big zoo in a big city. You will like it there. Now, run along and play, but don't get into trouble." George promised to be good, but it is easy for little monkeys to forget. On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but do you think it is easy for a monkey to fly?
No.
Oh, what happened? First this, and then this. "Where is George?" The sailors looked and looked. At last they saw him struggling in the water and almost all tired out.
And it's the birds have lighter bones to fly, so they don't fall.
Birds do fly. Monkeys don't usually fly. "Man overboard!" the sailors cried, and they threw him a life belt. George caught it and held on. At last, he was safe on board. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey until at last the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto the shore and on into the city to the man's house. See them getting off the boat.
Yes.
After a good meal, George felt very tired. He put on pajamas. He crawled into bed. He fell asleep at once. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. The man went away then. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun dialing a telephone.
I know what happens.
Do you think you know? Oh,
No, because I
ding-a-ling-a-ling. George has telephoned the fire station. The firemen rushed to the telephone. "Hello, hello," they said. But there was no answer. Then they looked for the signal on the big map that showed where the telephone call had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. "Hurry, hurry, hurry!" The firemen jumped onto the fire engines and onto the hook and ladders. "Ding dong, ding dong, everyone out of the way! Hurry, hurry, hurry!" Look at them speeding to the fire.
They can't.
Is there really a fire?
No.
The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire, only a naughty little monkey. "Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire. And then a thin fireman caught one arm and a fat fireman caught the other. "You fooled the fire department," they said. "We will have to shut you up where you can't do any more harm." They took him away and they locked him up. Does George look happy?
No. He's trying to find a way to get out.
He looks sad. Do you see his face there?
I know. He should look for the key.
Good idea. George wanted to get out. He climbed up to the window to try the bars. Just then the watchman came in. He got on the wooden bed to catch George, but he was too big and heavy. The bed tipped up, the watchman fell over, and quick as lightning, George ran out the open door.
That's funny.
He hurried through the building and out on the roof, and then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked on the telephone wires, quickly and quietly over the guard's head. George walked away. He was free. Down on the street, outside the prison wall, stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. He was curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon. He reached over and tried to help himself, but do you see him? Instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose. In an instant, the wind whisked them all away, and with them went George, holding tight with both his hands.
He's flying. He was trying to fly.
That's a lot of balloons for a little monkey.
He was trying to fly. Now he is.
Up, up he sailed, higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses and the people like dolls. George was frightened. He held on very tight. I think I would be frightened too.
And him like a real monkey trying to reach them to play.
At first the wind blew in great gusts, then it quieted. Finally it stopped blowing altogether. George was very tired. Down, down he went, bump, onto the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do. And then he heard someone call, "George!" He looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. Can you find the man with the big yellow hat?
Yeah, he's in the car. That's where I normally see him.
George was very happy. The man was happy too. George did slow down the post, and the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm. Then he paid the balloon man for all the balloons, and then George and the man climbed into the car, and at last they went away. To the zoo. What a nice place for George to live.
And only one of each of those animals got a balloon.
Yeah. So this is a list of a lot of the books that Mr. and Miss Rey wrote and illustrated. Did you like the pictures in that story?
No.
There was a lot of expression and a lot of color.
No.
So now that we've read that book, what were some of the things George was curious about?
I'm curious what's in that hospital in that other book.
Oh, Gareth is curious himself about this book. He may want to read that one next. George was curious about the boat. He was curious about the telephone.
And the flying.
And the balloons, right.
And he wanted to fly.
So
He's curious how they flew.
was his curiosity good or bad? Well, sometimes it was good because he got to learn a lot of things. But sometimes it got him in a little bit of trouble. Maybe we can think about when we're curious about something. Maybe we think just a bit. Is this a good thing to act on? Or should we ask someone else?
Ask.
Either way, it's a fun story. I hope you had a good time with this. If you are curious about the authors and illustrators of these books, Margaret and H.A. Rey, you can look at my next video. It's titled Biography Rey. There will be a YouTube link if you're watching this on YouTube. Have a good day. Goodbye.